What is up, you guys, and welcome back. It is Dog Talk with your host, Holden. Glad to have you guys here as we get another episode rolling. Obviously, we've got a lot to talk about. We've got a lot to catch up on. We did not have the preview episode of this Georgia-Alabama game, but we do have a review episode that we're about to jump right into. And we're also going to preview the Auburn game coming up this Saturday as well while we're doing everything. Just do it all at the same exact time. And that, again, this first thing we got to talk about this Alabama game. And there is a lot to talk to. The first thing I want to say on this is, man, if you want to watch any kind of film on this game, I got to give a shout out to the guy. It's Brooks Austin. That's where you go. You want to listen to some film. You want to listen to some honest criticism of both your team and also the team that's across from you, but just brutally honest about it. That's the guy to go to. You want to look at numbers. I look at Eric Taylor. I look at all the stuff that he posts over on Bulldog Report. Those are kind of two of the sources that I like to check out and get a lot of my information from. If you guys ever wondered, it's like, man, where does he come up with some of this stuff? With exception to just stuff that comes out of my brain. So that's a little tidbit for you there. If you guys want to go check them out, I'm sure that they would appreciate it. But other than that, we're going to try kind of jump straight into things here. Again, Georgia falling to Alabama 41-34 just seems to be our kryptonite every single year. Doesn't matter who the coach is. And if you guys are listening to this, you've listened to it all week long. Georgia can't get over the hump. It doesn't matter who the coach is. And it's the worst thing as a Georgia fan. It's the worst thing as a guy who loves to talk about Georgia to have to hear every single day is Georgia can't get over Alabama, especially to hear, oh, they can't get over them even with a different coach. Can't stand it, especially because this team that's on the field right now, this is a lot of the team that was left from last year. And I know you're saying, oh, there's a lot of pieces missing. You're right. There are some things that are missing from this team, but the core of that team is still there. And my God, if you didn't know it, Ryan Williams is 17 years old. That's what I wanted to say in the preview episode because I knew we were going to hear it 1,000 times, and of course you did coming into this game. But Alabama was very ready and very prepared for this football game coming into it. Coming out of it, I gained a lot more respect for what it is that Georgia did, not only because I'm a Georgia guy, but because Georgia in years past, they don't come back from a game like this. A lot of other teams in the country not only would not come back from this game, but could not come back from this game like Georgia did. Georgia, if you guys, if you're listening to this, you watched the game. Georgia went down heavy early, and I'll be honest with you, I was so shocked by it in the moment that I full on was just like, all right, well, this is a tough one, and I will be just like you that's listening to this. It ain't that I gave up on the guys, but I think we gave up on the guys. There was no coming back in this football game. It's not something we've ever witnessed because it's never happened at the University of Georgia to come back from a 28-0 deficit, a 30-7 deficit at the half, and not only to be close in the game, but to even sniff the chance of having a lead in this football game. Yeah, that's what Georgia did. Georgia falls down 28-0, just edging into the second quarter when they took that 28-0 lead, and it was ugly. It was ugly. Now, again, I said this off the top as far as going and watching Brooks Austin when it comes to brutal criticism of your team, honest criticism. I shouldn't necessarily say brutal because it's not really anything offsetting as far as, it's just truth. That's all there is to it. But he breaks down the film and shows you guys exactly what happened in this football game. And it's not really that Georgia came out flat. It's not that Georgia wasn't ready for this football game. It's that Georgia did not execute in the first half of this football game at all. We had multiple touchdowns left on the field early in this football game. If you watch the film on it, again, you've got to make the plays happen for it to matter. But when you watch the film on it, Georgia left a lot of points on the board, or off the board in that first half. They left a lot of points on the field that they should have scored. They should have taken advantage of these things that were going on. And later into the football game, that finally started to happen. But I do have to say here also, incredibly proud, just like Kirby has said. You've probably already heard the videos or seen the video that came out of Kirby's post-game press conference, but also his post-game message to the team. You can never get better than a Kirby Smart message to his team, and that was as good as it got. Just being as proud as you could possibly be for these guys to get back in this football game and to never stop fighting, to never give up. Hey, if you made it this far in, make sure that you follow us on Instagram, all of the things, Facebook, Twitter, at DawgTalk20. I would greatly appreciate it, and we'll kind of keep things rolling here. Again, Georgia leaving a lot on the field there in the first half. A lot to be concerned about there in the start, because for most eyes when you're watching it, you're just thinking, man, we can't do anything. We can't get the ball moving. We have completely abandoned the run game because we have to get back into this football game, and running the ball is just not going to do it. We went completely away from it. In all honesty, is kind of what it felt in my mind. And then we started to finally see in this second half, the pass game kind of came together. But I have to give credit to Alabama, and I don't like to. If you know me, I do not like Alabama at all. But I have to give credit to them because they executed, not perfectly, but almost flawlessly on the first 4 drives of this football game to immediately put points up on the board every single time. And in a guy who I don't necessarily care for, mainly just because he beats us every time we play him, and I just have to listen to that, and I have to deal with that, and that's Jalen Milroe, but I have to give the guy his kudos too. I mean, he absolutely ran that offense flawlessly in that first half and put Georgia at this deficit. A lot of the issues Georgia was having early was having to be ready to contain him, having to be able to have an edge against him for whatever he could possibly throw at you, because he is a really good football player. And all throughout this time, I've said he's just a glorified running back. And he is that, but he is also a really good pass pro guy too, and I have to give him that credit because I haven't done that. I've said this entire time, hey, all he can do is run the ball really well, and he's a big physical dude. And he showed us, hey, he can even throw the football too, which we're going to kind of dive deeper into. But Georgia goes down in this one 28-0 early before getting a Trevor Etienne touchdown, making it 28-7 after I think we were going for 2 and then ended up having to just go for 1 after a false start or something, illegal shift, whatever it was, that Georgia ends up having to just kick the field goal, make it at 28-7. And then just before the half, Georgia wanted to drive down, didn't happen. A few turnovers are happening in this, one of which, again, this is another thing to kind of talk about. Go back and watch the film on this game. The turnovers that happened in this game, some Carson Beck's fault, absolutely. You got to tuck the ball when you're running it. Credit out to Alabama's defender to perfectly put his hand on the ball when the time came. That's Carson's trying to scramble around, loses that fumble. But then one of the interceptions was blatantly just a terrible read on Carson's part, which doesn't happen often, but it happened in this game, and it happened at some of the worst times. But, Alabama also made one mistake on the night. One of the things about this game was going to be, hey, you have got to play perfect football to beat this team. And when you turn the ball over 4 times, 3 or 4 times, you're very, very lucky. 4 times, yeah. 3 interceptions and then the 1 fumble. You're very lucky to it not have been a 42-14 final of this game. The fact that it's 41-34 and you had a lead for a very short period of time, but you had a lead in this football game is almost a miracle in and of itself. Again, that's why I kind of have so much praise for how much this team was able to fight back, how much this team truly cared and wanted to be in this football game and should have early. Again, it said a lot more to me about Georgia than it did about Alabama, the fact that Georgia had everything possibly stacked up against it. If you come into the game and the game is at 7:30 and it's in Tuscaloosa, that's a lot to be stacked up against you in the first place. A number 4 ranked Alabama at that, with a quarterback in Jalen Milroe, who is one of the top Heisman candidate runners right now, right behind, I think, Travis Hunter in second, is Jalen Milroe. You've got that guy. If you don't have enough stacked up against you coming into this game with that alone, all right, go ahead and let's go ahead and spot Alabama some points right here. Let's go ahead and give them 28 points. And now, what are you facing now? Now you're facing all of the things that you've already faced, plus you're down 4 touchdowns really, really early in this football game. That was the key difference. It was really early in this football game. There's almost 13 minutes left, 12 and a half minutes left in the second quarter before Georgia finally starts to get to mount its comeback. Again, you get the 1 touchdown, but then you have a safety kind of ending the half there to be down 30-7. And that's where the fight came. The fight came in the second half. And I wondered, I think we always wonder this, especially after the Florida game. What did Kirby say? What did Kirby say in there? What happened? What changed? And I think we got a very calm demeanor in Kirby at half. I don't think you got the same kind of Kirby we had that got leaked out from the Florida game a few years ago. I think you had a really calm Kirby all night, because normally on the side, we're seeing kind of rage Kirby come out. He's screaming at guys. He's hollering. He's trying to get them motivated. He's trying to get them lined up. I shouldn't say necessarily motivated, but trying to get them in their head and say, "What are you doing?" And that didn't happen. I think he saw that, hey, I've got to stay cool, calm, and collective, and within myself, so that way the players understand, hey, there's no panic in this moment. We have to chip back one play at a time. And that was kind of the mantra in this game. It's, hey, one moment at a time, win one moment at a time. And even in the speech that he gave there post-game, it was, hey, we came up one moment short. And that's very true. And this is where the moments started to kind of compile back. We get a touchdown there starting the second half to Arian Smith, making it 15-30 after going for 2 on that. And also to say, hey, in the second quarter, Georgia started making the difference. Georgia started actually changing things. Alabama, again, did not score, but that first time starting the second quarter, and then they didn't score again with exception to the safety there in the end of the half. And then it took a really long time for Alabama to get back on the board. Matter of fact, late in the fourth quarter, actually, I take that back. They did kick a field goal late in the third quarter, and then they get the touchdown late in the fourth quarter, which we're going to talk about. But Georgia's defense adjusted, and adjusted really well, keeping Milrose somewhat in contain. Still had a couple of breaks here and there that we needed to do a little bit better on. But defensively, Georgia made the adjustments, whereas I think Alabama, this is another thing, and Brooks, I got to give credit to him on this, that he said it, and you just got to believe it, because I kind of wondered it myself. Hey, did Alabama take their foot off the gas? They're up 28-0. They're up 30-7. There's no way this team's coming back. And it does make you wonder, did they? And when you look and you listen to the things that this guy's talking about, no, that's not what happened at all. Alabama didn't change anything. I don't know if it's that, hey, maybe they felt like, if it's not broke, don't fix it. We're winning. Why in the world would we change anything? Well, then it wasn't until late in the game where Georgia gets back into this game, where Georgia takes a lead, that you realize, hey, maybe I should have changed a couple of things. Maybe I should have done a few different looks here and there. And that wasn't happening on Alabama's front. Georgia, on the other hand, it did. Not only did they make adjustments defensively, but they made adjustments offensively as well. And then the execution started happening. Defensively, we still had a few flaws here and there, but offensively, we started finally executing on the plays that we were trying to make in the first half. The plays that turn into turnovers on a screen pass that should have went to Arian Smith. Shouldn't have happened. Shouldn't have been a turnover at all, but it was. Didn't execute on that. A pass that's right over the top, that's a huge potential touchdown pass to him starting the game, which could completely change the momentum of this football game, starting off to Arian Smith that goes right through his hands and he drops it. He catches that football, even if he doesn't walk to a touchdown, even if he catches it for that big blast, who knows what happens. Maybe that gets enough of a rhythm under Georgia's belt offensively where they don't have the flaws that they started to have for the rest of the first half of this football game. That could have been the spark that Georgia needed starting off to really change the dynamic of this football game, but it didn't happen, unfortunately. From that point on, everything just kind of fell apart in the first half. Some of that, yes, is Kirby takes it on the chin and says, hey, some of this is my fault. But at the end of the day, the guys on the field also have to execute the plays the coaches are trying to put in front of them. And again, it's really the craziest thing to me about this game was just the fact that Georgia came into it on a bye week. Granted, Alabama had the same bye week, but everything just looked like, what is happening? Again, you go down 28-0 in any football game, especially being the second-ranked team in the country. It's unbelievable to look up on the scoreboard and see a 28 spot and your nothing spot on the other side and go, what is happening? But again, all boils back down to execution, which again Georgia continued to do in the second half. Late into the third quarter, like I said, Alabama kicks the field goal, making it 33-15, and then Georgia continued to take off from that point into the fourth quarter. An 8-yard touchdown pass to Lawson Lucky, making it 21-33. Then a 3-yard run for Dylan Bell, making it 28-33. And when we scored that touchdown right there, and I looked at the clock, and there's 5.5 minutes basically left on the clock, I went, oh my goodness, we are in striking distance. See, the thing about this game was all about clockwork. And I'm not going to say that on a sense of like a Kentucky game in clockwork, where Kentucky was very methodical about, hey, we're going to use as much of this clock as we can, because if we can limit the possessions of the team across from us, we're doing a really good job. I don't mean it that way. I mean, Georgia needed more time in this football game because they went down so far. I really think that if there's 3 more minutes left on the clock, Georgia might still win this football game, even having that 4th turnover right there at the end. Now, you just can't have it. You cannot have that last turnover and expect to win a football game, especially in the other end zone. There's no time on the clock, obviously, they're holding. But you just have to, some of these things we've got to kind of clean up and be better. But when that happened, I was like, all right, we're in striking distance. We can do this. And you want to talk about at the 2.5 minute mark when Dillon Bell is wide open down the field and he catches it and runs it into the end zone for Georgia to take the lead. You want to talk about losing your mind? I lost my mind. Everybody that was around me lost their minds. I want to find ring footage camera of this, where we all lost our minds when Georgia took the lead in this game, 34-33, after missing the 2-point conversion to go up by 3. Unbelievable. Again, you go down as much as Georgia did, and to come back in this game with everything that was possibly stacked against you, the way that it was, and take a lead. Thinking about being close to it is one thing, but actually taking a lead in this game is a whole nother thing. And this is why I say I'm not going to say that it necessarily meant more to Georgia, but I took so much more away from the fight that Georgia had in this game to the fact that they come back and they take the lead in this game. They did not give up so much to the point that it wasn't enough to get to 28-33 and lay down and say, hey, we came close. No, they kept going, and they took the lead. All that execution that they had missed in the first half was now clicking on all cylinders in the second half. This touchdown pass to Dillon Bell was something that was being set up early, and they were looking for this. Mike Bobo drew it up. It's been talked about this week. This play was drawn up, prepared to beat Alabama's secondary. When I started making keys to the game, that was it. Get over the top. I really felt like we could open the top on this Alabama defense, and we started the game firing like we were trying to do that. Again, not 100% accurate from Carson Beck, but also not executing on the plays that we should have executed that would have had us in this football game much earlier. Much earlier. If we execute in the first half of this football game the way that we did in the second half of the football game, this is a much different turnout in the end. Now, I know that I don't like to live and breathe on these ifs, ands, or buts because it don't matter at all. There's nothing to it. You lost the football game. That's all there is to it. Okay? So we're not going to say that. But I'm at least going to say that if that happens, I think this is a much different outcome. Now, again, got to give that credit to Alabama as much as I don't like to because it was a heck of a football game. And the next play that happened after Georgia took that lead was exactly that. A crazy football play of where just fundamental tackling seemed to be lacking in this football game as well. That also goes back to the execution part of things on defense, which is tackle someone. When you have an open field tackle, you have to make it. And really the pass to Ryan Williams on here for this touchdown, huge touchdown for Alabama to take the lead back and basically seal the deal, was a big deal because there wasn't terrible coverage on it. Ryan Williams, it wasn't a beautifully thrown 75-yard touchdown pass right in the basket over his shoulder for a perfect touchdown catch and run. No, it was a touchdown that Ryan Williams had to come back to, catch the football, and when he did that, he made some really shifty and cool moves. I got to give him that credit as well. Made some really shifty moves and ran right down the field, right past some of our best guys. Malachi Starks had a rough game in this one. Love Malachi and hope that everything gets a lot better this week. But we had a lot of trouble this week executing and tackling. And I'm sure this week, all throughout practice, that has probably been a big mantra in this one that we've got to execute better as far as tackling goes, because we had a really rough game in doing that. And he again had to come back to it, and we did not put him on the ground from that point forward. But then again, credit to Georgia. Again, you get the ball back at that point with a little over 2 minutes to play, and Georgia drove right down the field. They executed the entire time right down the field until the last play of the game, where the interception happens in the end zone, and that seals the deal. That ends the football game right there. Again, some of that was, Carson had kind of had this read. I mean, even the play before, if not a couple of plays before, I think it was Colby Young, that he had made this pass. I think maybe one had been called for a pass interference, one that he may have caught if it wasn't Arian Smith, but he had kind of been picking on that side of the field, and that just so happens that defender was looking that time, and it was a little underthrown. It wasn't the most great thrown pass, and I'm not going to say that might not have been a busted coverage on Colby Young's part. Maybe he was supposed to cut back a little bit earlier at the goal line instead of going 3 yards in, and that was the difference in it. Maybe Carson expected him a little shorter. I'm not in there to be able to tell you exactly what the play was supposed to be, but that could have been lack of execution right there at the end that ended up costing them the game. I'm not 100% sure on that, but unfortunately that's kind of where everything ends up lining up on it. Again, I wish I'd had the first and second half stats. I know my guy, Eric Taylor, again at the Bulldog Report, if you guys want to go and check out the numbers over there. I know he had some numbers posted up. Let's see, I might actually have them here. No, this is the preview for Auburn. Yeah, that's the final. Let's see if I can find the half, because he had all the numbers already pulled for the first half versus the second half in this game, and it was a big difference. Seeing the numbers in this one, because Georgia offensively did not have a very large amount of yardage. And oh yeah, here we go. Here it is. Perfect. So the score again, 30-7 at the half. Georgia had a total of 153 yards in the first half, 355 for Alabama in the first half. And I know you've heard it. Hey, it's a tale of two halves. It's really a tale of Georgia really executing well in the second half, making the fine adjustments, whereas Alabama didn't do it. Alabama didn't lay down in this football game. They didn't take a break. They didn't think, oh, we've got it in the bag, everything's going to be okay. They just didn't make adjustments. They didn't change anything. And for the first half of the football game, they didn't have to. They were up 30-7. There's nothing to adjust. There's nothing to change at that point. But as Georgia started to make those changes, that was probably an opportunity for Alabama to make those changes, and it didn't happen. Now, that's on the coaching side. I can't explain or give you the answer as to why that didn't happen, but it just didn't. And Georgia was able to reap the benefits on that. Let's continue through some of these half lines. We rushed the ball 11 times in the first half for 53 yards. They did 18 times for 156. We were 8 for 17 passing. That was 100 yards through the air. They were 18 for 21 passing, 199. We had already thrown 2 interceptions, no touchdowns. They had thrown 1 interception with 1 touchdown early in this game. 4 penalties for 35 yards for Georgia, 6 for 50 there for Alabama. Here's one of the biggest numbers, and it would be the factor in this game throughout the rest of it. 0 for 5 on third downs for Georgia, 1 for 1 on fourth downs, 2 for 5 for Alabama, 1 for 2 on fourth downs. Alabama ran 11 more plays than Georgia did in this first half, running 39. They averaged 9.1 yards per play in this as well, and they also possessed the ball right at almost 19 minutes. They had it 18 minutes, 44 seconds. Georgia only had it 11 minutes and 17 seconds. So that was a big deal in this game. Then we jumped to the second half. Alabama also had 1 sack in that first half, and then the second half, here's the big difference. Georgia outscored Alabama 27-11, had 366 total yards to Alabama's 192. We rushed it 15 times for 27 yards. Again, got completely away from the run game. Alabama also did the same thing, 14 for 17 yards. We went 19 for 33 through the air, 339 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception coming at the very end. They go 9 for 12 with 1 touchdown, 175 yards in the second half. Again, that was the touchdown to Ryan Williams late for that 75 yards. Before that, they'd only had 100 yards passing in the second half. Penalties, 2 for 15 yards there for Alabama, for Georgia, 4 for 40 yards against Alabama. Had 16 first downs to 5 for Alabama. Huge flip of the script there. 3 for 10, which is 30% on third downs for Georgia. 1 for 6, which is 17% for Alabama. Here's the big key difference in this game. Georgia's offense stayed on the field a long time and also had no choice because you're making the comeback, but you had to go for it on those fourth downs. So we were playing a lot of 4-down drives. Went 4 for 4, 100% on the night in the second half. End up totally going 5 for 5, going 100% on fourth downs in this football game. Alabama did not have to go for it there. Georgia ran 48 plays in the second half to Alabama's 26. Huge difference in plays on that half. Averaging really about the same, 7.6 yards per play for Georgia, 7.4 for Alabama. Georgia possessed the ball 16 minutes and 10 seconds. No field goals in the second half. The only field goal that was kicked was by Alabama in this second half. Georgia still had 2 more turnovers in that second half. Alabama did not. And then Georgia ended up punting the ball 3 times total, which is kind of crazy to think about. But again, we gave the ball up turnovers-wise 4 times, so we didn't have to punt as much. They had to punt it 5 times. They also had 3 sacks on the night. So huge difference in the end of this game as far as those stat lines go. Ends like this: Bama 547 total yards to Georgia's 519. Again, the 4 turnovers for Georgia, just 1 for Alabama. Georgia rushed it for 80 yards. They rushed it for 173. We passed it for 439 yards and 3 touchdowns. They passed it 374 yards for 2 touchdowns and then the 1 interception. Not a bad game by Carson Beck, especially the second half when he really got things going. The first half, I know a lot of guys that were saying, hey, we got to get rid of him. But, the way that I look at this is this. If you had taken Carson Beck out of this game, you don't come back in it. That's just all there is to it. Did we get in some of the trouble because of Carson? Sure. You can blame a little bit of it on him. I'm not going to say all of it because there were a lot of drop balls. There were a lot of drop passes. There were a lot of miscommunication as far as not executing the play that it was supposed to be, whether that's because they couldn't hear it, didn't know what the play was, or just were lost in the moment. I don't really know. I don't know if that was a lack in the coaching, like Kirby had said, that they just didn't really get it across in practice the way that they maybe should have. I know that they played indoor facility and got the sound cranked up so that way they could be prepared for all of the noise that was going to happen there at Bryant-Denny. So I don't really think it was that, but had it not been for Carson Beck, Georgia doesn't come back in this game. Was he a little bit of some of the issues that happened? Yes, but he was also the only reason that you got back in this football game. Again, throwing for 439 yards. And again, that number is going to be inflated because you're in a comeback situation. You have to. You got to throw the ball. And again, he did everything he possibly could to get us back in that game. Unfortunately, making a couple of mistakes in there hurt and it didn't end the game. It wasn't the difference in the game. Other things have to be executed to where you're not in this position. Trevor Etienne led the charge, rushing 55 yards and the 1 touchdown. Dylan Bell also had 9 yards and 1 touchdown. Then through the air, Trevor Etienne 11 yards. Dylan Bell had a 100-yard night with a touchdown. Arian Smith a big night, 132 yards through the air with the 1 touchdown. Dominic Lovett 59 yards. Colby Young 57 yards. Also Lawson Lucky 22 yards and the 1 touchdown as well for him. Big night for Dan Jackson as well, leading the charge in total tackles with 10. Malachi Starks had 8. Dan Jackson also had the 1 interception on the night as well. Again, we did not get any sacks in this game. We had a couple of rushes, but no sacks in the game. C.J. Allen also in there, 6 tackles. Dalen Everett, 6 tackles as well. So, a big game, huge game. Didn't go the way we thought it would. Again, my keys to it were take the top off, run the ball. When you get down as much as you can, you're not going to be able to do that. And then containing Milroe, we did not do that in the first half of this football game. We did do a lot better in the second half. I'll at least give us credit there. We did a lot better in the second half of trying to get back in this football game, of trying to contain him and being able to hold on to him. So, hey, that was at least a little bit better. Some of the other games that did go on around the country as we wrap up the review there, before we start to preview the Auburn game really quickly, you had Arkansas and Texas A&M. I was pulling for Arkansas in this one, and they lost it late, 17-21 against Texas A&M. Oklahoma-Auburn, also kind of the same situation there. Auburn giving it up again. Turnovers is killer for Auburn in this game. They lost that one 27-21 again to Oklahoma. Kentucky does end up pulling off the upset of number 6 Ole Miss 20-17. Definitely makes you feel a little bit better coming off of that Georgia-Kentucky game a couple of weeks ago, seeing now what it is that Ole Miss ran up against as well. To me, it more or less proves that, hey, this Kentucky team is something to be reckoned with. It's not just a team in Kentucky that you can just kind of walk away from thinking, hey, this is going to be a simple game, this is going to be easy. Doesn't matter what happened to them in the past against the South Carolina team. It is the team that they are moving forward, and that is a team who is fighting, who is coming out here giving you everything you could possibly ask for, and going to put it all on the line, and they did that here against Ole Miss at Ole Miss. Even though I think it was like a noon kick regardless, they still took care of business, getting the win there again, 20-17 on the road. Florida State falls to 1-4 on the season, losing to SMU 42-16. Oregon does beat UCLA 34-13. See if I can see some of the other bigger ones that were going on. BYU over Baylor 34-28. Clemson beats Stanford 40-14. Georgia Southern beating Georgia State 38-21. Let's see. Michigan beat Minnesota barely by a field goal 27-24. UNLV over Fresno State 59-14. Penn State over Illinois 21-7 in a top 20 matchup. Let's see who all we got. Arizona upsetting number 10 Utah 23-10. A&M over Arkansas. We already talked about that one. Let's see. Ohio State over Michigan State 38-7. Notre Dame over Louisville, another top 15-25 matchup. 31-24 Notre Dame. Nebraska over Purdue 28-10. USC over Wisconsin 38-21. Texas over Mississippi State 35-13. Took a little while for Texas to get started in this one, but then they ended up pulling away with that one. That's some of the other bigger games other than the Miami and Virginia Tech game that ended on Friday, which was a wild game, wild ending in that one. Take it up for grabs. Literally, what you want to say on that one as far as who you think did or did not win that game. Now, let's kind of fast forward to things here really quickly. I'm going to pull up the top 25, at least coming into this week, because we do know that Georgia obviously falls in the polls, which is okay. We kind of expected that to happen after losing to Alabama this weekend. Again, I don't have a problem with it. Not falling far, especially considering you come back in this game. I think this is a really good opportunity that if you don't make a little bit of a comeback of this game, you probably fall much further than you did in the polls, but you only fall down to 5th out of 2nd. Alabama does take the first spot, Texas at 2nd, Ohio State, Tennessee, and Georgia rounding out the top 5. Then you get Oregon, Penn State, Miami, Missouri, and Michigan rounding out the top 10. USC at 11, Ole Miss falls down to 12th, LSU at 13, Notre Dame 14, Clemson 15, Iowa State 16, BYU climbs up to 17th, Utah falling down to 18, Oklahoma up to 19, Kansas State up to 20, Boise State up a few more spots to 21, Louisville falls down to 22nd, Indiana coming in actually they don't move anywhere, they stay at 23rd, Illinois falls down to 24, and UNLV at 25 after a undefeated record continuing. They're 4-0. So that is what we have for our AP Top 25 coming off of last week. Now let's look at some of the injuries that we do have coming into this football game against Auburn as we kind of get ready to gear things up for this week. Trying to get my pages set here. Some of the injuries. Tate Ratledge, we know we're still going to be without, obviously, Roderick Robinson. London Humphreys is still battling an illness. I know last week I saw that it looked like it might have been mono. I'm sure I'm not the only person that put that out, but I would assume this is still the same thing. I know that they did at least take him off of this list right pregame last week against Alabama, but he did not end up playing in that game. Jared Wilson is questionable coming back into this one. Scovey White also questionable. Jordan Hall, the same thing. Michael Williams is still questionable. I know he's just sore. It's really more or less what Kirby was saying through this one. Hopefully we still get him back in this. But the big one that has come up in these injury reports that they put out is that Smile Munden. Don't know what the injury was. We expect something has happened to him in practice here this week. I think Monday maybe he was in a press conference and everything seemed good, and then maybe after that something's happened, whether it be an injury or whether it be something just in-house related to I don't really know what, but right now he's not going to be playing in this Auburn game, so take that for what you will. We'll see what comes of it as the time allows and once the time gets here. But let's kind of dive into things with this Georgia Auburn game. Obviously, the world's greatest outdoor cocktail party is not this game. It's the longest. My goodness, why do I always mix these up? It's the oldest, Deep South's oldest rivalry. There we go. We're going to talk about the cocktail party coming up here in a few weeks, but not today. So we got Georgia on tap again with Auburn this weekend. I wanted to see if I could get the spread of it. Can't get it pulled up. Last I looked, it was like 24. Let's see if that line has changed any. And I do want to get some of y'all score predictions on it also coming in. So make sure you guys are following us there on Instagram, Twitter, all the things at Dog Talk 20, so you can interact with that. What you guys think the score is going to be on it. Georgia is right now a 22-point favorite. Over under on it's 51.5. Auburn, not a bad football team. I know it looks a lot worse being a 2-3 record. They've got a lot of things to figure out. A lot of this is kind of on the quarterback side of things, but a lot of it is just the fact that Hugh Freeze's offense are really good at turning the football over. That's all there is to it. It's not really just a Auburn problem. It's not really a Peyton Thorne problem. It's not really a true freshman that you have trying to start in their problem altogether. It's all encompassing. You know, when you have a guy who's really RPO oriented and Hugh Freeze's offense, you're going to have more turnovers. And historically speaking, looking over time, that's what he is known for. He's known for that RPO, but in an offensive scheme where you don't necessarily have the most see if I can find the best way to say this. You don't necessarily have the top tier quarterback who's trying to run that it can be kind of difficult not to turn the ball over, and that kind of continues to happen. Auburn was in that game against Oklahoma. Otherwise, this is a 3-2 record for Auburn that they kind of give up. But if they could ever get the quarterback play down, they'll be good in this game. They can really compete in this game. And let's not forget, even though it was a Jordan Hare last year, this was a close football game. It took late into the football game and some Brock Bowers magic for Georgia to take the lead and actually win this football game in Auburn last year. So this isn't a game that Georgia just walked away with last year, and I don't think that's going to be any different in this one. Now, historically, looking back, it's been a while since Auburn's had a lot of success and scored more than, I think, 11 points in this matchup in Athens. But nonetheless, I still think this is something you can't just look down on Auburn and think, hey, we've got this one in the bag. It's no big deal. Don't worry about it. We're going to be good to go. I think you got to prepare in all the ways to be prepared for an Auburn team to come in here. Again, they can figure it out offensively. They're going to be good to go. The good thing is right now everybody has gone to doubting Georgia. And I think we know that Georgia usually comes out of these games when they have a loss on fire, ready to play. Hopefully they don't come into this kind of hungover. I don't think that's what you're going to see. I think you're going to see a team motivated, ready, understanding, learned a little bit about themselves in that comeback against Alabama last week, even though they fall in the end of it. I think you got a team who's starting to kind of find an identity, and that's a really good thing, especially when we get right here 5-6 games into the season like we are. It's a great time to really have that identity figured out, to where we can really hopefully come into this game, execute early and often throughout the entire football game, assert your dominance, take the spread of this game, who cares about it, but take it and run it right up and teach them, hey, we are the team that we are. We are Georgia. This is who we are. This is what we're going to do. You got to stand up against us for 60 straight minutes, and you're going to take every lick that we're about to give to you. And I expect Georgia to do that in this football game. I don't care what Auburn is when they come in. Georgia has the identity. They know who they are. They know what they do, and that's what's going to happen in this football game. Georgia's coming home. They're hungry. They're doubted. People don't think that they can do it. They don't think they're the top team in the country. The odds for them to win the national championship has dipped, and that is the best place for this team to be right now. They got a little bit of humility. As Kirby always says, humility is a week away. They got that last week. They got a great dose of it, and now they get to use it as motivation. They get to use it intrinsically just to think about week in and week out as they move forward through this schedule, because this schedule gets no easier for them. You've got a couple of games on there that look, at least on paper and from some of the other games that have gone on, they look a little bit comfortable, I'll say, but there is still a tough schedule ahead. You're still traveling to Ole Miss. You're still traveling to Austin and playing Texas. You're still getting Tennessee at home. You still have some rough and tough games that are ahead that we have to look forward to. But Georgia, I think, should be able to take care of business in this one. It dates back, obviously, to that 2017 game that Auburn thumped Georgia, to really date back to when Auburn had a win. I think it was in this last game. Let's say 21-14 in 19, 27-6 and 20, 34-10 and 1, 42-10 and 22, 27-20 last year in Auburn. So going to be a really good matchup. You know, I think this is a great opportunity again for Georgia to kind of come back in and assert the dominance that we know that Georgia is and be ready to play in this game. And I look forward to it. I look forward to seeing Georgia get back on the field after this. You know, a lot of times after a loss, you kind of lull in it and you're like, man, that stinks. It's tough. You know, but the good thing is we're not out of it. You know, it's one of the things I didn't really want to be excited about this year with the 12-team playoff. You know, does it make games not really matter? And I've kind of looked at it now more of, yeah, these games do matter. There's a lot of football left to be played. We lost that game, and it stinks, but it matters a lot because we learned who we are in that football game. Had you not played this football game, you don't learn that. Had you just won it simply and everything, you don't necessarily learn the same lesson that you do in a loss. You learn a lot more in a loss than you do in a win, and luckily this was a close one. This wasn't one that you got thumped in the mouth. You're able to stand back up, fight back, and battle through. So I'm incredibly excited to see what Georgia does throughout the rest of the season. And again, I take a lot away from that game last week and say, hey, I really like this football team. I'll always walk with this football team. I walk with this team through many years where Georgia wasn't sitting at the top. And that's one thing Hunter and I talked about preseason and offseason was, hey, we've got to be thankful. We've got to be excited for where this team is, where this team has gone, and where they can go. And that is exactly what I'm going to do as we move forward, because these dogs got a lot of bite left in them. And I'm looking forward to seeing them playing in the Deep South's oldest rivalry here in the Auburn, Georgia game in Athens, 3:30 on Saturday, October the 5th. We get Greg McElroy, I think, is up in the booth with a couple other guys. That'll be exciting to see. Let's see what some of these other games are around the country. In the SEC, you get Tennessee and Arkansas. You get UCF and Florida, which UCF is flavored. They are favored for, even after getting thumped by Colorado last week. You get Ole Miss and South Carolina. Sneaky game there. Missouri and Texas A&M should be a good one. Let's see what Missouri is made of in this one. Alabama at Vanderbilt. Hey, Vanderbilt might keep that one close in the first quarter. Something to watch there. That's at least what you get out of the SEC. Let's see what we get out of some of the other games around the country. Do we have any other big ones? Let's see. Utah State, Boise State, meh. Clemson, Florida State, woo. It would be good if Florida State was good this year, but they are not. Baylor and Iowa State. Indiana, Northwestern, could be interesting. Michigan, Washington. Hey, what about a national championship rematch coming on right here? Miami and Cal, I think that's where game day is this week. USC and Minnesota. Iowa and Ohio State. UCLA and Penn State. Let's see, we've gone through all of those. SMU and Louisville, sneaky game there. Rutgers, Nebraska, that one could end up being a good one. West Virginia, Oklahoma State, that's going to be a good matchup there as well. Have a couple coming up on Friday. Syracuse, UNLV, Michigan State, Oregon. Couple playing here on Thursday. You also get USC or TCU, in Houston on Friday. You got Troy and Texas State here on Thursday. Sam Houston and UTEP as well on Thursday. So some big games going around. Score prediction for the weekend on Georgia and Auburn. Meh. Kind of hard to say. Again, I think Georgia kind of comes out with their head on fire in this one. I like this one. I don't know, 38-13. 38-13 feels like a pretty good line on this one. That's where I'm going to take it. So, hey, we will check in with you guys after the game, hopefully on Sunday, if we don't have too much that comes up between now and then. Again, follow us on Twitter, all the things at Dog Talk 20. So that way, if something comes up, you'll be the first to see what's going on there when the time comes. Check in with you then. Go Dogs.